Good evening, travelers of the dark. Welcome aboard the Midnight Caravan. Before we journey north, like, subscribe, and leave a light in the comments, and tell me where you're listening from. Tonight we cross into Alaska, where daylight forgets to come back, and the ice keeps what it takes. Let's begin. I came to that village because I thought teaching was supposed to make a difference. A river town west of nowhere, maybe 200 people if you counted the dogs. The Kuskokwim runs black and wide there, quiet even when the ice is breaking. The air always smells faintly of fish oil and diesel. I'd been assigned to the small school, 3 classrooms, 1 satellite dish, and a radio that only worked if you kicked it. The first few weeks were fine, lonely, but fine. Kids were shy, polite, curious about the new teacher from outside. The first time I saw the light was a Thursday in February. Dusk hits early that far north, 4 in the afternoon, and the whole world turns indigo. I was locking up the school when I noticed something across the river. Not the Aurora. This was lower, too low, and too steady. A white-blue glow moving slow along the tree line like someone carrying a lantern underwater. I remember thinking it had to be a snowmobile, maybe one of the local hunters. But it didn't bob the way headlights do over uneven ground. It floated, smooth as a dream. The next morning, the kids were buzzing about it. "The Wandering Light," they called it. "It follows the river," said Eddie, my oldest student. "It listens when you say its name." They said it had been showing up since Christmas. Their parents told them not to look at it too long. "Makes you forget where you are," one girl whispered. I laughed, because what else do you do? But that night, I saw it again. It was snowing, light flakes drifting like dust, and the light hovered just above the river ice, sliding upstream against the current. I watched from my cabin window. Every time I blinked, it seemed closer. I turned off the lantern to get a better view. For a heartbeat, the light stopped moving. Then it swelled, like it had noticed the darkness around me, and I swear it brightened, pulsing faintly. My radio clicked on by itself. Static first, then a whisper through the fuzz. "Roll call," it said, my own voice, low and clear. I didn't move. The static hissed again. "Roll call," it repeated, softer now, like it was trying to remind me of something I'd forgotten. I stepped outside, half angry at myself for being spooked. The wind bit through my coat. The river glowed faintly from underneath, a moving mirror of black water and shifting ice. The light hovered near the far bank, perfectly still. I could see my breath curling toward it, thin and silver. And then faintly, I heard the kids, not in the distance, but behind me, inside the empty school. Laughter, chairs scraping. I looked back, and the classroom windows glowed faint yellow, like someone had turned the lights back on. The door was swinging open. I crossed the yard fast, boots crunching on snow, and pushed inside. The air smelled of chalk and cold metal. The lights were all off, the desks empty, but the blackboard had something new written across it, wide looping letters in my own handwriting. Roll call, and underneath, the students' names. Each one crossed out, except for mine. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe Eddie or one of the older kids had snuck in, but the door had been locked, and the snow outside showed only my tracks. That night, I left the radio unplugged. Didn't matter. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to a sound, whispering through the air vent above my bed. A child's voice. "Teacher," it said, "we saw it come to your window." I sat up. My mouth was so dry it hurt to breathe. The room flickered with pale blue light, faint as moonshine. Through the frost on my window, I saw the glow again, hovering right at the edge of the schoolyard, and faintly, just faintly, I could see shapes around it. Small ones. When I blinked, they were gone. But outside, the light had split into 2, and both were drifting straight toward my cabin. They weren't fast, just steady. like two ghosts pacing on ice. The glow reached the edge of the riverbank and stopped, humming so softly it buzzed behind my eyes. The snow under the window glowed faint blue, and for a moment I thought I could see shapes inside the light, like silhouettes shifting underwater. I couldn't move. The whole room felt pressurized, the way it does before thunder. My breath fogged the glass and froze there, thin and white. The light stayed there for maybe 30 seconds, maybe an hour, I couldn't tell. Then they dimmed and drifted back toward the tree line. When I finally opened the door, the air outside was still and wrong. No wind, no sound from the river. The snow where the lights had stopped was melted to slush in perfect circles. Inside each circle were footprints, small, bare. By morning the snow had covered them, and I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. Then Eddie came in late for class. He looked pale, eyes too wide. "You heard it last night?" he asked. "What?" "The roll call." He said the voice had come through his bedroom wall, calling names in the same order I did every morning. When it said mine, the light outside his window flared bright enough to wake his mother. That night, half the village saw it. The river glowed from below like it was carrying lightning instead of water. The lights moved in pairs now, weaving between the banks. Dogs barked until their voices cracked. The elders went down to the shoreline, chanting in a language I didn't know. They wouldn't let me near. The next morning, classes were canceled. Still, I stayed to tidy the classroom, to pretend life was normal. The blackboard had been wiped clean, but when I turned my back, I heard the chalk roll. When I looked again, a single word was there in crooked capitals. Here. I stepped closer. The chalk dust wasn't dry. That night I unplugged everything, the radio, the space heater, even my clock. I wanted silence, but around 2 a.m., the hum started again. Not from outside this time, from inside the walls. It came with a faint vibration, the kind that crawls into your teeth. Then a child's voice. "We're waiting for you, teacher." I bolted up, heart hammering. The window glowed white-blue, and this time the light was right up against it, crawling over the glass like liquid. I could see the outlines of hands, small, pressing from the other side, fingers dragging frost in lazy circles. "Stop," I whispered. "Please stop." The light pulsed. The radio on the counter, still unplugged, clicked on. Static filled the room, followed by my own voice, distorted and slow. "Roll call," it said again. "Roll call." Then softly, "Answer." Something inside me broke a little then. I grabbed my jacket and boots, stumbled into the night, and ran for the school. The snow reflected every breath of light from the river. My shadow split across the drifts like there were two of me running. The door to the school was open. Inside, the desks were pushed against the walls. All the chairs sat in a circle at the center of the room, perfectly aligned, facing outward. The floorboards pulsed faintly blue under the thin layer of ice that had somehow formed inside. And the blackboard, oh God, it listed every student's name again. This time each name glowed faintly, traced in frost. Mine wasn't at the bottom anymore. It was first. The air vibrated. Chalk began to drag itself across the board, letter by letter, scrawling under my name, Present. The lights outside flared. Blue poured through the windows until the walls looked like aquarium glass. Voices whispered over each other. My kids, calling names, giggling, echoing. I tried to shout for them to stop, but the moment I spoke, my own voice came back through the radio from behind me. "Teacher is present," it said calmly. "Begin." The floorboards cracked. A low wind moved through the classroom, even though the door was closed. I looked down, and beneath the ice I saw faint, moving shadows, small shapes, faces, reaching hands. Then the chalk dropped, and all the lights went out at once. When they came back on, every chair was empty, except one, at the front of the circle, where my parka hung neatly on the backrest, still steaming with breath. When I came to, it was daylight. I was lying on the classroom floor, my breath fogging faintly in the cold air. Every chair sat where it belonged again. The board was blank, the radio dead. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed everything, until I saw my parka. It was still draped over the front chair, frozen stiff. Inside the collar was a patch of ice shaped like a human shoulder, and beneath it, written faintly in the frost, were the words, "Roll call complete." I staggered outside. The village was silent. No one on the paths, no smoke from the houses. The sky had that washed-out silver look that comes after a blizzard, though I couldn't remember any storm. The river, though, it wasn't frozen anymore. The ice had split clean down the middle, a black wound of open water running through it. Steam rose off it, shimmering with faint blue light even in the daylight. At the far bank, I saw figures. Kids. My students. They were standing shoulder to shoulder, looking at me across the gap. Eddie was in front. He raised his hand in that awkward wave he always did before class. "Stay there," I shouted. "Don't move." They didn't move. They just stared. The wind picked up, and their shapes wavered like reflections on water. Then one by one, they turned and walked into the light, rising off the river. Not down or across, into it. And as each one vanished, the glow dimmed. I ran toward the shore, ignoring the cracking under my boots. The air was so cold it hurt to cry. When I reached the edge, the water looked calm. Too calm. My reflection looked back at me, paler, thinner, with eyes that glowed faint blue around the edges. Then it spoke. "Teacher," it said, my lips moving in the reflection but not on my face. "You forgot to answer." I stumbled back. The radio in my pocket, unplugged, unwired, silent for days, clicked on with a burst of static. "Roll call," it whispered. "Roll call." The ice at my feet groaned. A line of small bubbles rose beneath the surface, tracing a path from the center of the river straight to where I stood. The water began to glow again, that deep, steady blue. And then I heard them, voices rising with the light, the children laughing softly, calling my name in unison. Not scared, not angry, just calling. I don't remember falling in. I remember choosing to move closer, like gravity had a voice, and I finally decided to listen. The cold hit so fast I didn't feel it. The light closed over my head, turning the world into a bright, muffled hum. For a moment, I saw shapes around me, small hands, faces smiling, eyes pale and gentle like frost. They circled me, whispering. Eddie touched my shoulder and mouthed something I couldn't hear. Then everything went still. When I woke up again, I was back in my cabin. Fire burned low in the stove. My clothes were dry. The radio sat on the counter, quiet except for a faint crackle every few seconds. Outside, it was dawn. I walked to the window. The river was frozen solid again, smooth as glass. No footprints, no light. Just a gray strip of silence through the trees. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, until I turned to the blackboard hanging by my desk. There were names written there again, faint and crooked, like breath on cold glass. All my students' names. And mine, last. Every name was marked present. Mine had a note beside it this time. Stay after class. And when I looked out the window again, the light over the river was back, only one this time, hovering low, patient, like it was waiting for the lesson to start again. People think ice is quiet. That's only because they've never parked 30 tons of diesel and bad decisions on a frozen inlet at 2 a.m, while the wind scrapes the cab like it wants in. If you ever do, you'll hear it. The ice has a throat. It talks by cracking its own bones. This happened to me the winter I was hauling fuel from a tank farm outside a town on the Gulf. I won't name it. If you know, you know. But the inlet looked like a slab of white steel all the way to the black stamp of the far shore. The company set a flagged route across, checked with the locals, drilled their test holes. Safe, in the way that means nobody died last week. I was on my third trip of the night, cab stinking like coffee and coolant. The temperature sat low enough to make the vinyl seats feel like frozen meat. I'd already killed the radio because the static started getting in my head. You won't believe this, and that's fine. I didn't either, at first. The first odd thing was the ridges. Pressure ridges look like frozen waves where plates of ice pressed up against each other and stayed. You plan for them, you go slow, you don't get fancy. But these ridges, I kept seeing the same one. Same shape, same little wind-carved cave near the base, same spray-painted X some joker had put there years ago. It was like driving past the same fence post forever. I chalked it up to the dark. The world's just a dome sometimes in winter. Headlights, a tunnel of snow crystals, the rest swallowed. I did my checks. RPM steady, temp steady, the creak and low groan of the ice spreading out under my tires like a map unfolding. I watched the flags whip backward in my mirrors. A coyote loped along my right side for a while. It didn't look at me, just kept pace, thin as wire, tongue black in the light. When I hit a patch of drift and slowed, it slowed. When I idled, it sat. When I rolled again, it rose and moved until the dark took it. That's what put the thought in my head about pace, about matching. I stopped halfway to pee in a bottle. I don't care how unromantic that sounds. And when the engine dropped to an idle, the whole world sharpened. The wind thinned. The ice noises got personal. I heard a pop deep down and then, faint but wrong in the way a whisper in church is wrong, a tap. Tap, tap. From under me. Could have been the suspension settling, a bubble groaning, whatever. I capped the bottle, laughed at myself, rolled forward. The ridge with the cave was back. I put the window down to watch my breath boil and to make sure I wasn't dizzy from fumes. The cold burned my teeth. My headlights pushed the ridge's shadow away like a moving wall, and the little drift cave glowed a dead blue. Something rattled in the back of my trailer, metal on metal, and when I checked the mirror, I saw nothing. Just the long white ribbon behind me, 2 lanes of tire scars, and the black gulf of the night beyond. You spend long enough alone in the dark, and your brain sets up its own pranks. That's what I was telling myself when I realized the truck had slowed all by itself. Not by much, a crawl down from 18 to 15, then to 10, but enough that the engine note changed. I pressed the accelerator and felt the resistance you get when you're pulling through slush. Except there wasn't slush. The flags weren't twitching. It was like a hand had closed over the belly of the ice and squeezed a little. I was done playing with shadows. I brought the speed back, straightened on the flagged line, and picked a point past the ridge where I'd commit to it. The inlet answered with a low thunder as my weight moved. Then, quieter than thought, tap, 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 matching the rhythm of the engine. When I eased off, it eased off. When I braked, it went still. When I idled, the tapping began again under the cab, not the trailer, right where my boot heels rested over the floor mat. I killed the engine, just for a second. Dead quiet swallowed me. The wind hissed farther off, as if it had stepped outside. The world narrowed to frost skittering on glass and the tick of hot things cooling. From beneath my boots, through 6 inches of steel and the slab of the inlet, something knocked. Once, solid as a fist on a door. I don't know what kind of person kills an engine on an ice road in the middle of the night. Guess the kind who still thinks the world's logical, that everything can be explained by pressure, current, or tired nerves. That's who I was, before that knock. It wasn't loud, it was just deliberate. One thump, then another, like something below wanted to test if I was listening. The cab floor gave a faint vibration that shouldn't have been possible through that much ice. My heart did that hollow stutter thing, like it was skipping beats just to catch up with itself. I started the engine again. The noise of the diesel felt too loud now, like I was trying to drown out something that belonged here more than I did. The headlights caught the ridge ahead. Same one, same cave, same X. I told myself the knocks had been stress fractures, just the inlet's lungs shifting, but I couldn't shake the timing of it. Perfectly spaced, almost polite. I pressed on the accelerator and aimed dead center between the flags. The pressure ridge rolled closer. My stomach clenched. The ice cracked, a sharp sound that felt like it happened inside my teeth, and for half a second, the ridge moved. Not collapsed, moved. A ripple, subtle, like something underneath flexed. I swore, shifted into reverse, and felt a drag. The trailer listed half a degree to the left. A dark seam appeared between the ridges. Not water, just darkness, thick and alive somehow. The ridge pushed again, gently. I knew that motion from somewhere, like when you nudge the underside of plastic wrap floating on soup. Except that soup was supposed to be frozen solid. I radioed dispatch. Static. Not the normal kind either. This static hissed with the rhythm of the tapping I'd heard earlier. 3 short bursts, 1 long. The same pattern. Base, you copy? More static. Then a voice, faint, layered under mine. Keep it running. It wasn't dispatch. It was my own voice, quieter, slower. Keep it running. I dropped the mic. My mouth went dry. The air smelled sharp, ozone mixed with something mineral like wet metal. I slammed the truck into first and floored it. The ridge flexed again, the headlights jittering as if something huge stirred below, following the warmth of my engine through the ice. I didn't look back. Just kept my eyes locked on the faint red beacon that marked the far shore checkpoint. The road beneath me trembled, subtle, rhythmic pulses. Every few seconds I'd hear another muted thud beneath the tires, like footsteps under glass. My side mirrors shook so badly the horizon doubled. 10 minutes later, should have been 30, I reached the far shore. Or I thought I did. The land rose ahead, black spruce clustered like broken fence posts. I rolled onto what looked like packed snow, eased to a stop, and finally breathed. Except the flags were still ahead of me, miles more of them, stretching into the dark. I opened the cab door to step out and check, thinking I'd gone off course, maybe circled. The air hit like knives. My boots crunched on snow that felt too thin. When I looked down, I saw my reflection in the ice. Not a faint shimmer, clear, like standing over a sheet of dark glass. Something was moving in that reflection, behind my shape. At first, it looked like shadows curling under the surface, maybe cracks refracting the light. But then it pressed up, and I saw the outline of a hand, not human, the fingers too long, joints wrong, and it pressed where my shadow's feet were. The ice groaned. A bubble of air snapped free beneath me. I stumbled back toward the truck, slipping on the slick surface. Inside the cab, I slammed the door and gunned it again, praying the diesel would catch. It hesitated like the cold itself didn't want to let me leave. Finally, it roared alive. And that was when I saw the ridge again in the headlights, 50 feet ahead. It hadn't been in front of me a second ago. It was closer, taller, blocking the flags. The ice under my tires bulged upward once, then split with a deep, wet crack that made the truck rock. Something huge was coming up from underneath, pushing through the frozen world like it had just realized I was real. And that's when the CB sputtered again, my own voice whispering through the static, calmer this time, almost relieved. You shouldn't have stopped the first time. I don't know how I didn't die right then. I should have. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times, the ridge swelling like a lung, the headlights bending off wet ice as something black pushed upward. I think I froze longer than I should have, because the next memory is motion. The truck lurching forward, wheels clawing for traction, and the radio vomiting my own voice in whispers. You shouldn't have stopped. You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have... Then just static. The ridge cracked open. I heard it, thick, glacial, alive. A sheet of ice the size of a house peeled back with the sound of tearing metal. For a heartbeat I saw what was under there, a slope of flesh the color of old snow, ridged and moving like a muscle, and something gleaming beneath it. Not eyes, not quite, just reflections, as if the ice itself had remembered every light that ever touched it. I hit the throttle so hard my foot slipped. The tires spun, biting, then caught. I don't remember steering, just sound, steel screaming, ice hammering the undercarriage, the whole cab shuddering like it wanted to break in half. The world turned white in the mirrors, not snow, steam. The ice behind me was boiling, blowing up in slow bursts as the thing beneath exhaled or shifted. I kept the pedal down until the flags disappeared, until I hit shoreline snow and the tires dug into frozen gravel. I jumped out before the engine stopped. The wind nearly knocked me over, but I ran anyway, 30 feet, maybe more, then turned back. My truck sat half on the inlet, half on land. Behind it, the ice buckled once more, rose like a slow wave, and then settled flat. The steam faded, just black sky, white ice, and a broken trail of tire ruts. I waited for the headlights to flicker, for something to break the surface again. Nothing. Not a sound except wind. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt watched, like whatever was under there was still thinking, still listening. When I finally made it back to town, I must have looked feral. They thought I'd hit a ridge and panicked. They checked the inlet the next morning. No cracks, no evidence, no sign my truck had gone off route. They showed me satellite shots. Perfect ice, smooth as glass. No ridge, no cave, no X. I quit after that run, sold the rig to a guy in Anchorage and took up plowing lots inland. Quieter work, fewer frozen miles between me and ground that doesn't move. But it's funny, when I push snow at night, I still hear things under the blade. Pops and groans, maybe nothing more than trapped air. Except sometimes, only when I idle too long, I hear a tap, one solid knock from under the plow. The first time it happened, I jumped down to look. The snow under the truck was packed and clean, no cracks, no holes, just the hum of the motor and the wind whispering through spruce. The second time, I didn't look. I just drove, faster. The tapping followed for a few seconds before fading. Last week it happened again, but this time there was something new, a sound I hadn't heard since that night on the inlet. A low, deep creak, like ice folding over something alive. And then a voice on the CB, clear as daylight, layered over the static. "Keep it running!" I threw the mic out the window, and when I looked up from the dash through the swirl of snow, I saw it again in the distance. A pale ridge cutting across the frozen lot, wind carving a small blue cave at its base. I haven't been back to work since. I keep my truck locked, keys hidden, fuel line drained. But every night, when the wind picks up, I swear I hear a slow, rhythmic tapping from somewhere outside, steady, patient, matching the old engine idle, like it's waiting for me to start it again. The old cannery squatted on the edge of a forgotten inlet, gray and crooked, like the tide had tried to drag it back into the sea, but gave up halfway. When I first took the night watch job there, I thought I'd lucked out. Quiet hours, good pay, and all I had to do was walk the halls, check the breakers, and keep the generators running through the off-season. The locals warned me, of course. They always do. "Don't go past the freezer hallway after midnight," one of the older dockhands told me. "The floor there remembers different blueprints." I laughed, said something about drunks and ghost stories. He didn't laugh back. The first week was ordinary enough. I'd start my rounds at 10, hit the south corridor, check the temperature gauges in the cold room, then circle back by the office to log readings. The building was a maze of peeling paint, rusted rails, and flaking murals of smiling workers from the 1950s. I liked the sound of the place, the slow drip from broken pipes, the wind pushing the old roof tin, the hollow creak of wood swelling with tide air. It was comforting, until it started to change. The first time I noticed something off was subtle. I walked the usual route: break room, main hallway, cold storage, then back through the office. But when I came around the corner, I ended up in the packing line instead. No turn, no wrong door, just a straight hall that had replaced itself while I wasn't looking. I froze, looked behind me, empty corridor, lights humming. Looked ahead, the belt conveyors stood in a neat line, the ones that hadn't worked in decades. The air smelled faintly of fish brine and machine oil. I told myself I'd just gotten turned around. The place was full of duplicate doors and dead ends, except my footprints on the dusty floor led straight into the new room. The next night, it happened again. The hallway past the locker room now opened into a narrow stairwell I didn't recognize. The air grew colder the deeper I went, and when I turned my flashlight on the walls, I saw rusted hooks, numbers etched into the concrete, old production tallies. I followed them down until the stairwell spat me out in a corridor that should have been upstairs. The layout didn't make sense anymore, but somehow I could always find my way back to the office. I started drawing maps to prove it wasn't me losing my mind. Every night I'd make notes, angles, distances, door counts, and every morning the floor plan would rewrite itself. Doors shifted a few feet left, hallways stretched longer, the exit signs pointed toward walls. One night, I decided to test it. I taped a sign to the cold room door: "If you move, I'll notice." By the next shift, the note was gone. In its place, someone or something had written below it, in black grease pencil, "We notice too." I stopped sleeping properly after that. Sometimes I'd catch flickers of movement in the reflection of the steel tanks, my flashlight beam doubling back a split second too late. I'd hear things shifting behind the walls, the sound of pallets dragging across the floor though no one was there. Once, I followed the sound of dripping water through the east wing, but when I turned the corner, I found myself standing in the break room again. Same calendar on the wall, same coffee mug I'd left. Only, the calendar was flipped to a month that hadn't come yet. I ran my hand over the date boxes. They were warm. That night, I kept my flashlight on the whole shift. When I reached the main corridor around 3 a.m., I saw a faint glow down near the processing floor. I should have radioed it in, but curiosity got the better of me. As I walked closer, the light grew brighter, rippling like water through the glass window of the observation room. When I peered inside, I realized it wasn't light at all. It was motion. The walls themselves were shifting, panels sliding and twisting quietly, like the building was adjusting its bones. I stepped back, heart hammering. The corridor behind me was gone, just a blank wall where the doorway had been. The cannery was folding itself again, slow, patient, like it wanted to see how long it could keep me inside before I noticed. And from somewhere deep within the structure, through the groaning metal and echoing ducts, I heard my own voice whisper, "You missed a hallway." I spun toward the sound, flashlight jittering across rust and shadow. The echo of my own voice faded down one of the new corridors. Soft, conversational, like I'd just walked ahead of myself. "You missed a hallway." It came again, quieter. Every instinct screamed to get outside, but outside wasn't a direction anymore. The exit signs had all gone black, and the floor beneath me vibrated with a slow, almost breathing rhythm. I kept moving anyway, counting my steps, 30, 40, 50, until the hallway bent left where it shouldn't have. Someone had been here before, that much I could tell. Along the wall were taped sheets of graph paper with hand-drawn maps, red marker lines, and desperate notes. "Turn back. It's learning the route. Don't let it finish." I followed them until the smell hit. Brine, metal, something old, the kind of rot that feels wet in your throat. The corridor opened into a narrow chamber I'd never seen before, lit by a single fluorescent tube swaying overhead. The floor was covered in footprints, dozens, all bare, and against the far wall stood a door labeled Packing Floor, Section C, except there was no Section C on any blueprint I'd ever seen. The doorknob was warm when I touched it. Inside, the room pulsed faintly with light. Not electric, more like phosphorescence, seeping from seams between panels. The walls didn't meet at right angles. They curved inward, slightly concave, giving the feeling of being inside something's ribcage. The intercom system, dead for years, crackled to life. "Shift change," it whispered in my own voice. "All personnel report." The temperature dropped fast enough to fog my breath. A low mechanical hum filled the space, rising and falling like slow breathing. Every few seconds, the metal flexed, expanding by a hair, then tightening again. I backed up until my shoulders hit the door. Only the door was gone. Just a flat panel now, smooth as the rest. The light brightened, revealing words etched into the steel beside me. "Corrective rebuilding in progress." My pulse pounded so hard it felt like part of the machinery. The humming deepened and the floor began to tilt, just slightly, enough to make the sensation of sliding inevitable. I threw myself toward a service hatch, pried it open, and dropped into a crawl space that smelled like salt and hot metal. The noise up above shifted to a chorus of grinding and clicks, like the building was rearranging itself in real time. I crawled until the passage split. The left tunnel sloped downward, warmer air coming through it. The right one breathed cold, with a faint sound of water dripping. I took the right. Heat meant machinery, and machinery meant the generator room, and maybe an exit. The metal walls brushed my shoulders as I moved. In some stretches, the rivets were soft beneath my hands, as if the steel wasn't solid anymore. My flashlight flickered, and in that dim pulse I saw shapes stamped faintly into the metal. Handprints, dozens of them, all pressed outward from the inside of the wall. I crawled faster, panic chewing at the back of my throat. When I finally saw light ahead, I nearly sobbed in relief. I pushed through a hatch and came up into the office. Everything looked normal. My chair, my coffee mug, my half-finished map. The relief lasted 3 seconds before I saw the map itself. It wasn't the one I'd drawn. The paper was newer, cleaner, the lines precise, and every hallway was labeled in my handwriting, even the ones I hadn't found yet. In the corner, someone had scrawled a note. "We are almost done drawing you." My throat locked. The hum in the walls started again, deeper this time, vibrating the desk under my palms. The stapler slid an inch toward the edge, then another. I grabbed my radio, thumbed the mic. "Base, come in. Anyone." Static. Then my voice, through the speaker. "Base here. Keep walking. The plan isn't finished." Something heavy moved behind the wall. The groan of shifting girders. A seam opened in the plaster near the floor, revealing a thin sliver of glowing blue light. I could feel air breathing through it, slow, rhythmic. And from inside that seam, faint but clear, came a whisper that chilled me worse than the cold ever could. "Welcome back to Section C." When I turned, the window behind the desk now looked out over a factory floor filled with moving silhouettes. Every one of them shaped exactly like me. There must have been a dozen of them, maybe more. Each figure moved in a slow, mechanical rhythm across the factory floor, carrying crates, stacking them, checking invisible clipboards. They all wore the same uniform I did. Same reflective vest, same headlamp strapped above the brow. And when one turned its head, the light hit a face that was almost, but not quite, mine. Too smooth. Too calm. Like the expression had been memorized, not lived. I backed away from the window, trying not to make a sound. The radio at my belt hissed again. "End of shift," my own voice said. "Return to your stations." Below, every figure stopped at once. Slowly, in perfect sync, they all turned toward the observation room, toward me. I dropped the radio. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. The figures tilted their heads, then started walking upward, not climbing stairs, not using ladders, just striding into the air as if the space between us had become a ramp only they could see. I ran. The office door opened onto a hallway that hadn't been there before, a long passage lined with flickering yellow lights and doors on both sides. Each door was labeled with a date, some old, some recent, some I didn't recognize yet. I caught a glimpse of one that said, "Tomorrow, 3:17 a.m." The humming sound followed me, growing thicker, like an engine made of breathing. The lights dimmed behind me as I ran. The air smelled like salt, rust, and something faintly sweet, like blood that's been washed clean. At the far end of the hallway, a single exit sign glowed red. I threw myself toward it, slammed through the door, and stepped straight into the cold room. It took me a second to register it. The walls were lined with hanging fish that looked petrified, their scales dulled to gray. The floor was wet with melted ice, pooling around my boots. In the center of the room sat a desk. My desk. The one from the office upstairs. On it lay the same maps, the same mug, the same note. "We are almost done drawing you." The intercom crackled again. "Shift complete," said my voice. "Please remain in your assigned section." The door behind me sealed with a metal clang. A low vibration began under my feet. The walls shifted, inching inward with a slow, patient scrape. "No," I whispered, pounding on the door. "No, no, please." The metal didn't stop. The temperature dropped fast, my breath turning solid in the air. The hanging fish began to sway, bumping into each other with dull, meaty knocks. Their eyes glimmered faintly, reflecting that sick blue light I'd seen before. The humming deepened until it felt like something massive was turning just below the floor. Then the intercom crackled again, softer now, almost kind. "Correction complete. Thank you for your service." The walls stopped moving. The light flickered once, twice, and steadied. I was shivering so hard my teeth hurt. I looked down and realized the water around my boots had frozen solid, trapping me in place. Across the room, a new door was forming in the wall, metal warping outward like something inside was pressing to get through. I heard footsteps on the other side, then a knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps. The door split open, and I stepped out. Same coat, same flashlight clipped to the vest, same scar on the knuckle from that time I caught my hand on a hook. He smiled, my exact smile, and said, "You missed a hallway." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The other me reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and slid it across the floor toward me. I watched it freeze in place on the ice between us. He turned, walked back through the new door, and vanished. I forced my legs free, grabbed the paper, and unfolded it. It was one of my maps, only this time the lines were perfect, every room neatly labeled. At the center, written in black grease pencil, was one new section I'd never seen before. Living floor, occupant area 1. I dropped the map. The lights in the room flickered, and for a second, I saw reflections in every hanging fish eye, rows and rows of me, frozen mid-motion, watching. I don't remember how I got out. The next thing I knew, I was standing outside the Cannery, dawn bleeding over the inlet. The air was calm, the building quiet behind me. I quit that same day, drove inland until the smell of salt disappeared. But last week, a package showed up at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a roll of drafting paper. It was a blueprint of my apartment. Every wall, every outlet, every inch correct. And on the bottom corner, stamped in faded ink, property of Whale Bay Canning, Section C, Revision 002. I haven't gone home since. But I swear, when I close my eyes at night, I can hear the walls creaking, like they're learning the new layout. The road crew I worked with called that stretch of tundra the Dead Mile, not because anyone had died there, at least not officially, but because nothing ever stayed right. Equipment stalled for no reason, compasses spun, and once we found a grater sunk 1/2 meter into ground that had been solid an hour earlier. We were widening a service route outside a remote interior town, late autumn, the kind of cold that turns diesel to syrup. Frost came early that year. Our job was to cut through a section of permafrost to lay new fiber conduit. That's when we found it. We were using heat lances to thaw the ground, each of us taking turns to guide the nozzle. Steam rose in slow clouds, the soil darkening as it softened. Then something clanged against the blade, a hard, clean sound that didn't belong to rock. At first, I thought it was bone. But when I pried it out, I saw it was carved. A small charm, maybe 4 inches long, made of something pale, walrus ivory, or maybe antler. The shape was simple, but strange. A ring of figures holding hands, their faces turned inward toward a hollow center. One of the guys, Oleg, said it looked Yupik or Inupiat, but the carving style was wrong, too sharp, too modern in its symmetry. The faces were smooth, all identical, no eyes, just slight open mouths like they were whispering into the circle. We passed it around until the foreman told us to stop playing archaeologist and get back to work. I kept it, though, pocketed it. It felt warm, even in the cold. That night, the temperature dropped fast, 20 below, and the heater in our cabin failed. We sat around the propane stove drinking coffee laced with whatever cheap bourbon was left. Oleg joked about the frozen little choir we'd dug up. I laughed, trying not to think about how heavy it had felt in my pocket. When I pulled it out to show the others, the carving looked different. The ring of figures wasn't closed anymore. There was a gap. "Did you break it?" Oleg asked. "No, it's not broken." I turned it over. The figures had moved slightly apart, their tiny hands no longer linked. It wasn't like this before. We stared at it until the generator lights flickered and the stove hissed out. The sudden dark was thick, absolute. Then from outside came a sound like whispering wind, but it wasn't wind. Too steady, too low. It sounded like someone mumbling through teeth. Oleg grabbed his flashlight, went to the window. "You hear that?" The beam hit the snow and stopped on footprints leading from the dozer toward the tree line. Bare feet. The foreman swore. "Get the hell back. No one's out there barefoot." But the footprints kept coming, one at a time, forming in the snow as we watched, a slow line of indentations crossing toward the cabin door. Then they stopped, right at the threshold. We didn't move for a full minute. The only sound was frost crackling against the window. Then, from the corner of the table, the charm gave a faint metallic click. All of us jumped. The carving had changed again, the figures now linked hands, the circle closed. That's when the generator roared back to life on its own, flooding the cabin with light. The air smelled like burned insulation, and something else, something faintly organic. I looked at my glove. The pocket where I'd kept the charm was burned black. Oleg tried to laugh it off, but none of us slept that night. The next morning, the snow was clean, no footprints, no sign of movement, but the door frame was frosted over with a thin ring of ice in the same shape as the charm. We decided to bury it back, drove the dozer out to the same dig, waited for the frost to soften, and dropped the charm into the pit. Covered it with permafrost and prayer. For the rest of the day, everything worked perfectly. No stalls, no blown seals, no noise. But when I checked my phone that night, I saw a photo in my gallery I didn't take. A close-up of the charm sitting in the snow, freshly dug out again, the little circle of figures now holding hands around something new in the center, a tiny shape that looked exactly like a human head. I deleted the photo, but the next morning it was back, edited to show a second head forming inside the ring. And that one had my face. I didn't tell the others about the photo. Out here, stories spread faster than frost, and I didn't need more reasons for anyone to think I'd lost it. I deleted it again, powered the phone off, stuffed it in the glove box, and tried to pretend it hadn't happened. By the next morning, The weather had turned. The wind came from the north, sharp as glass, and the whole horizon shimmered like metal under the cold. The machines refused to start. Diesel had gelled overnight, even though we'd treated it. The foreman said we'd take the day to defrost the engines manually, no digging. I was scraping ice from the bulldozer tracks when Oleg came running from the cabin, waving his phone. "It's back," he said. "The charm. Look." He showed me a photo, same angle, same composition as the one I'd seen. Except this time the charm's circle of figures had widened. The ring was bigger now, the faces clearer, like the carving had been worked overnight. And in the center, where that small head had been, there were two now. The second one, though faint, had Oleg's beard. He laughed nervously, but I saw the pulse in his neck hammering. "You did this, right? You're screwing with me." "I didn't touch it." The foreman overheard us arguing and came over. We showed him the photo. His face went tight. "Delete it. Now, both of you." We did. But that night, after everyone turned in, I heard the generator falter again. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the heater shut off. I pulled on my coat and went outside to check. The air was still, the stars sharp and cruel above the trees. In that silence, you can hear the ground, tiny pops and sighs as the permafrost shifts in its sleep. I walked around the back of the shed to the generator, flashlight beam cutting through frost. That's when I saw the dirt pile we'd buried the charm under. It wasn't there anymore. The pit was open, steam rising faintly from it, like the earth was breathing. Something gleamed faintly inside. I leaned closer. The charm lay half buried, the ring of carved figures slick with moisture. Except now, they weren't carved anymore. They were growing from the bone, tiny hands fused at the tips, and there were more of them, 7 now, not 5. I dropped the flashlight. When I picked it up again, the beam caught something else. Small depressions in the soil, circling the hole. Not boots this time, bare toes. I backed away slowly, keeping the light on the pit. The wind rose again, carrying faint whispering, the same cadence as that first night. Low, steady, like someone talking through their teeth. "Put it back," the whisper said. "It remembers warmth." I ran inside, slammed the door, and locked it. Oleg was sitting up in his bunk, staring at his phone. His screen was lit, the same photo open again, only this time the charm's center was filled. 10 heads now, faces blurred like they were still being carved. Oleg's photo count showed 1-1. The image had replaced everything else. We tried powering the phones off, pulling batteries. Didn't matter. When we turned them back on, the image was still there. Worse, the circle in it was moving, the figures shifting slightly every few seconds, widening the ring. The foreman said we'd head to town in the morning, call the company, report frost heave, whatever excuse got us away from that pit. But at dawn, the road was gone. Where the packed trail had been, there was only white, perfect snow. No tire marks, no frost ruts. It was like the world had erased the way out overnight. We stood in the cold, the 3 of us breathing clouds that froze midair. Oleg pointed at the horizon. "There," he said. "The ridge." I followed his gaze. A faint shape stood there against the light, small, thin, swaying slightly. It was holding something in its hands, something small and white. The wind picked up again, carrying a voice, our foreman's voice, but distant, strained. "Don't go near it. Don't look. It remembers warmth." Then the generator exploded, a short, sharp bang, and the cabin windows went dark. We turned back toward the smoke, and when I glanced at the snow again, the figure on the ridge was gone. In its place were fresh footprints, bare feet, leading right toward us. I ran to the cabin for cover, but when I reached the door, Oleg's phone was sitting on the step, screen cracked, showing a new photo of the charm's circle now completely closed, with 3 new heads inside it, carved in perfect detail. We didn't pack. We didn't even speak. The moment I saw those 3 new faces carved into that charm, mine, Oleg's, and the foreman's, I knew we were already too late to leave. Inside the cabin, the air was thin and sharp, like breathing through glass. The heater was dead, the lights out. The only sound was the slow tick of ice forming along the window seams. Every so often, it cracked, like the building was quietly sighing. Oleg was pacing, muttering to himself. The foreman sat by the door, shotgun across his knees, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the frosted glass. "Something dug it up," I whispered. The foreman didn't look at me. "Something never should have been buried." The generator wreck outside hissed quietly, cooling down. The smell of diesel and burned wire seeped through the cracks. I looked at my hands. They were shaking even though the air had gone beyond cold. That was when we heard the voices again. They didn't come from outside this time. They came from under the floor. Soft, rhythmic, muffled words that rose in the gaps between boards. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear against the wood. The sound was clear, like dozens of mouths whispering the same phrase at once. "We remember warmth." I looked up. Oleg had gone still, head cocked like he was listening to something else entirely. "They're calling names," he said softly. "Do you hear it?" The foreman stood. "No one move." Oleg smiled faintly, a tired, faraway look. "It's okay. They just want the charm back." He walked toward the door before we could stop him. His breath fogged once in the air, then vanished as he crossed the threshold. The foreman shouted, but Oleg didn't even flinch. Outside, the snow glowed faint blue. I could see the ring of footprints circling the generator wreck, the ground around it steaming. Oleg walked right into the center of it and knelt. He reached into the snow and came up holding the charm. It was larger now. The figures were nearly human length, joined in a perfect ring, their carved faces tilted inward toward something glowing faintly in the middle. Oleg held it to his chest. "It's warm," he said. His voice was shaking, not from cold, but something like awe. "It's alive." The foreman raised the shotgun. "Drop it." Oleg didn't move. The charm pulsed once, a dull heartbeat that shimmered across the snow. Steam rose in a perfect circle around him. He looked back over his shoulder, eyes pale as fog. "It remembers us." The light flared, blinding white, and the foreman fired. The blast cracked the air, but when the smoke cleared, Oleg was gone. Just a ring of melted snow where he'd been standing. The charm lay half buried again, faintly glowing from within. The foreman dropped the gun. "We're leaving," he said. "We tried. We really did. But every direction led back to the same ridge, the same blasted patch of snow. No matter how far we drove or walked, the horizon folded in on itself until the cabin reappeared ahead of us. Night fell fast. We gave up and huddled inside, waiting for dawn that never came. Around midnight, the temperature rose suddenly. The walls started sweating, condensation dripping from the ceiling. Then, through the fogged window, I saw movement. Shadows outside, walking the perimeter of the cabin. Bare feet, slow, even steps. Their outlines were almost human, but too thin, too stretched. I counted 7 before I lost track. The foreman cocked the shotgun again, hands trembling. "They won't come in," he whispered, like he was trying to convince himself. But the doorknob turned. Not fast, not forced. Just a careful, polite twist. The latch clicked open, and a blast of wet air rolled through the room. The foreman fired into the doorway. The blast lit up the yard for half a second, and in that half second, I saw what was waiting outside. A ring of figures, hand in hand, their skin gray as bone, eyes hollow pits leaking faint light. In the middle, where Oleg should have been, something pulsed, like a heart made of ice. The foreman screamed, dropped the gun, stumbled backward. I ran for the back door, but the boards under my feet were soft, breathing. The floor gave way, and I fell through into freezing darkness. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of voices all around me, whispering softly through water and earth. We remember warmth. When I woke, it was daylight. I was lying beside the highway, half buried in snow, no cabin, no crew, just my truck parked 50 feet away, half frozen, keys still in the ignition. The company called it an accident, carbon monoxide, bad fuel, exposure. No one believed what I saw. But last night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject, no message, just a single attachment. A photo. The charm again. Bigger now, the circle wide enough to fill the frame. And in the center, a new head forming. Mine. They said the Aurora was brightest in the interior that year. The locals were half right. It was bright, but not in any way I'd ever wanted to see. I was a photographer back then, chasing light across Alaska for a travel blog that maybe 50 people read. My truck was half full of gas station coffee, half full of camera gear I couldn't afford. I'd been sleeping in the cab for 3 days, waiting for the sky to wake up. It was late February, bone cold and too quiet, when I pulled off the highway near a long stretch of frozen gravel road that cut into the spruce forest. The GPS showed nothing out there, no lodges, no cabins, just the thin blue line of a river buried under ice. I figured that made it perfect. I parked, stepped out, and the cold hit so hard it made my vision flash white. My breath came out in ribbons. Overhead, the first faint shimmer of green brushed the sky. The Aurora. Finally. I set up my tripod and started the long exposures. A whisper of wind moved through the trees, slow and even, almost like a voice. I ignored it. Alone out there, you learn to tune out weird noises, or you go crazy fast. But when I changed the lens, I realized the whisper was still going. Not the wind. Too regular. Too word-shaped. I took the headphones off. It was faint, but I could hear it clearly now. Voices. Dozens, maybe hundreds, somewhere beneath the snowpack, murmuring in overlapping tones. I knelt, pressed my glove to the ground. The vibration was real, like a low hum beneath the frozen earth. Radio interference, I muttered to myself. Aurora can mess with frequencies. Except the words being said were familiar. I leaned closer. One voice, higher, strained, was repeating something over and over. Center the frame. Slower shutter. Don't breathe. They were my words. The same phrases I always said when teaching workshops, half under my breath while shooting. I stumbled back. My radio clicked on by itself, static crawling through the speaker. Then my own voice, crisp and calm. Adjust the focus. The light's coming. I ripped the batteries out and tossed the unit into the snow. The sky was blazing now, ribbons of green and violet twisting together. It should have been beautiful. But something about the way it moved looked intentional. Like it wasn't drifting. It was searching. Every few seconds, a ripple of light would curl downward toward the ground, shimmering like it was feeling along the tree line. I snapped a photo, just one, and checked the preview. The image was overexposed, the whole sky blown out white, but in the lower corner, reflected in the frozen river, was a shape I hadn't seen with my eyes, a cluster of faint figures standing along the riverbank, all facing me. I turned the camera toward the spot. Nothing there, just ice and darkness. But when I looked back at the preview again, one of the figures had moved closer. I checked my distance finder, 50 meters from the tripod. I didn't remember anything in that direction except a stand of spruce. Then the Aurora rippled again, and this time the voices got louder. Dozens of overlapping murmurs, rising and falling in waves that matched the colors above. I could make out words now, phrases that bled together. Open the shutter. Don't look down. We see the light through you. The green ribbons dipped lower, brushing the tops of the trees. The shadows between the trunks deepened, and several somethings, moved there, slow and curious. I grabbed my camera, stuffed it in the bag, and headed for the truck. Every step crunched like thunder in that still air. Behind me, the sky brightened to a blinding white-green glow, and a voice, not from the radio, not from under the ground, but right beside my ear, whispered, "Stay still. You're in the frame." I ran. When I slammed the truck door shut, my headlights flicked on by themselves, shining straight ahead. In their beam stood a single shape, faint and colorless, the same height as me, hands lifted like holding an invisible camera. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, watching through something I couldn't see. Then the Aurora Above bent like a curtain in a storm, and the figure lifted one finger to where its lips should have been, as if to shush me. The next morning, when I checked my photos, every image showed the same thing, the Aurora behind me, and my own silhouette standing in front of the lens, smiling into the light. I didn't sleep that night, not even after the sky went dark again. I just sat in the truck, heater off, staring at that last photo until my laptop battery died. Every frame, 30-second exposures, one after another, showed me in front of the camera. Same stance, same smirk, same gloved hands gripping the tripod. The problem was, I never left the driver's seat. By morning, the Aurora was gone, and the air was thick with frost, the kind that chews sound down to whispers. I told myself it had to be a glitch, maybe reflection, maybe light bounce off the snow. But the photos weren't identical. In each one, the figure's posture changed slightly. Head tilted, arm raised, a subtle wave in one. It was moving. I decided I'd drive into Fairbanks and have someone look at the memory card. Except the road wasn't where I left it. The truck tires sank in shallow snow, crunching over a surface that used to be gravel, but now gleamed slick like ice. The tree line had shifted, trees where there hadn't been any, a ridge of rock where the open sky should be. The GPS spun its little blue arrow in circles. I rolled down the window to check landmarks. The air hissed, not wind, whispering, faint, steady voices rising from under the ice again. Not words this time, tones. A hum that almost sounded like breathing run through a filter. It matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. I grabbed my camera and stepped out, just to prove to myself the world was still real. My boots sank deeper than they should have, like the snow was thinner here, less solid. When I lifted the lens, the sky behind the clouds flashed faint green, a remnant shimmer. I took one shot. The shutter clicked. The air pressure changed, a subtle pop in my ears, and the whispering stopped. Everything went still. When I checked the preview, my stomach turned over. The photo was darker this time, but not empty. In the center of the frame stood a man in heavy gear, camera strap slung over one shoulder, eyes pale and unfocused. He was half sunk in the snow, chest deep, as if the world had hardened around him mid-breath. It was me. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. My lips were moving. The image grain made it look like I was trying to speak through the glass. Behind my frozen double, the faint glow of the Aurora bent downward, its color pooling on the ground like spilled ink. I dropped the camera. The sound of it hitting the ice echoed far too long, like the ground beneath was hollow. The radio in the truck crackled again. I hadn't touched it since last night. Through the static came a voice I recognized immediately, mine again, soft and steady, whispering over a hum that might have been the wind. Don't fight the exposure. The light remembers you now. The truck headlights flickered and died. A second later, the Aurora flared to life above me, green and violet and deep, wrong red, painting the snow in waves. The air trembled like a plucked string. I turned back toward the forest. The figures were there again. More of them this time. all standing in a half circle, faces hidden in the glow. Some carried cameras. Some didn't need them. One stepped forward, its outline flickering like film burn. When it spoke, the voice came from below me, muffled through ice. "Show us what you see." The ground vibrated, and every light in the sky bent downward at once, spiraling toward me. I dropped to my knees, shielding my face, but the glow came through my eyelids. It wasn't just light, it was seeing. Every memory I had flashed by, every click of every camera I'd ever held, every photo, every glare off glass. When the light faded, I was back in darkness. Only one thing glowed faintly beside me, my camera. The lens pointed upward, recording on its own. The screen flashed a single message in white text. Recording, voices below. And faintly, from the speaker that shouldn't have had a speaker, I heard overlapping whispers in my voice, describing the scene I'd just lived. I snatched the camera, hurled it toward the trees. It hit something invisible with a dull clang, hung mid-air for a heartbeat, then vanished straight down like the snow had opened its mouth. I ran for the truck. The windshield reflected the Aurora above, except in the reflection, the cab wasn't empty. Someone sat in the driver's seat. Me again. He turned his head as I stared and mouthed something I couldn't hear. Then his hand came up, slow and deliberate, pressing a single finger to the glass between us. "Shh." The reflection smiled. When I blinked, I was sitting in the driver's seat after all, frost coating the inside of the glass, camera in my lap, while outside, another me was still standing in the snow, staring back, waiting for the light to return. For a few long seconds, I couldn't tell which version of me was breathing. Frost lined the inside of the windshield in perfect feathered veins, each one pulsing faintly green like veins under skin. My reflection, no, the other me, stood motionless outside, the Aurora crawling slow spirals behind his head. He lifted the camera. My camera. I hadn't touched the shutter. The flash went off, silent, brilliant, and the world jumped. Suddenly I was outside again, snow crunching underfoot, staring at the truck with him sitting inside. My breath fogged the glass, but his didn't. His eyes glowed faint silver, wide and calm, like he'd finally figured something out I hadn't. He started the engine. Headlights flicked on. Then he drove away down the road that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. Tires whispering across snow that somehow didn't leave tracks. I stood there, shaking, whispering to myself, "Wake up! It's exposure shock. You're still at the tripod. You fell asleep." But the air wasn't cold anymore. It hummed. Every surface vibrated, trees, snow, even the sound inside my skull. The Aurora above had frozen in place, a perfect curtain of color unmoving, like the sky was waiting. And then the whispers returned. Only this time, they were inside my head, layered under my heartbeat. My own voice, multiplied, speaking in different tones and tempos. Fragments of sentences I'd never said. Frame the light. Keep still. Remember what the world looked like before it forgot you. I stumbled back toward where the tripod had been, but the snow was unbroken. No tripod, no footprints, no tire ruts from the truck. Nothing. Just a perfectly smooth sheet of pale green-lit ice. I called out, hoping for an echo, but the sound went nowhere. The Aurora rippled once, just once, and in that brief flicker, I saw figures beneath the ice, not buried, not dead, just waiting. Their faces glowed faintly, lit from within. Their mouths moved in sync, whispering the same phrase over and over. "Show us what you see." I realized, slowly, they weren't beneath the ice. They were the light. Every photograph, every flicker of color in the sky, every impossible ribbon was them. Voices flattened into light, faces printed across the firmament, reliving their last image forever. Something shifted behind me. I turned, and there was the truck again, parked exactly where I'd left it. The headlights burned weakly, flickering in time with the pulse of the aurora. The door hung open. My camera lay on the driver's seat. The display screen glowed faint white. On it, a single still image. Me, standing in the snow, eyes reflecting green, mouth half open in mid-whisper. Underneath, digital text blinked. Recording complete. I picked it up, fingers numb, and the screen flickered. For an instant, I saw dozens of faces flash across it, some mine, some not. Travelers, photographers, hunters, everyone who'd ever stopped here to take pictures of the northern lights. Each face mouthing the same words, each one looking straight through the lens into something watching from the other side. The wind died. The hum under my feet deepened until it wasn't sound anymore, but weight. The aurora bent low enough to touch the ground, threads of color brushing the snow like ghostly hair. And then it spoke, one last time, through every whisper. Every flicker, every shimmer of green and violet above me. Keep the shutter open. Light filled the world. White, soundless, infinite. When I woke, I was back in the truck. The engine idled, steady. The radio whispered softly, my voice, again, reading coordinates I didn't recognize. Outside, the aurora danced low across the horizon, but I didn't feel afraid anymore. My camera was gone. In its place on the passenger seat sat a fresh memory card, labeled in my handwriting. Voices Below, Part 2. I should have thrown it out. Instead, I drove toward the lights, and as the road curved into the dark, I could hear the faint sound of a shutter clicking in time with my heartbeat, over and over, like something under the sky was still taking pictures of me. You lose track of time faster than you'd think on an island that barely sees daylight. Whalebone Station sits maybe 50 miles off the coast. An old whaling outpost turned wildlife research station. 2 buildings, a diesel generator, and enough wind to scrape the paint off your thoughts. I volunteered there one winter as caretaker. Cheap rent, quiet work, just keep the pipes from freezing and log weather reports. The previous caretaker had left suddenly in November. The note he taped to the generator door said only, "If the clocks start arguing, leave." I thought it was a joke. The first few weeks passed in a blur of routine. Wake up, check gauges, record wind speed, write down temperatures that felt made up. 41, 38, 42. The sun barely touched the horizon. When it did, the world turned gold for 15 minutes. Then sank back into blue. The radio link with the mainland worked only in bursts. They'd call to confirm I was alive, I'd give coordinates, they'd fade into static. The generator kept time better than my watch did. Everything froze eventually, except that old diesel beast. But sometime in late January, the ticks started to slip. I noticed it when my alarm went off an hour early. At least, I thought it was early. The sky outside looked the same, a smeared gray, neither dawn nor night. My watch said 6:15. The wall clock said 7:19. The generator's meter blinked 5:02. I laughed it off, reset them all to match, and kept working. 2 days later, it happened again, but worse. The wall clock jumped backward when I wasn't looking. I heard the click, checked it. The minute hand had reversed by 5 ticks, and outside, the wind had stopped. Dead still. Not even the snow plume off the roof moved. I stood at the window for a long time, waiting for something to make sense. Then, as suddenly as it had stopped, the wind roared back, shaking the building. From then on, the clocks never agreed again. The kitchen clock lagged 3 minutes behind the wall clock, which lagged 12 behind my watch. The generator's readout blinked random digits, never repeating. I thought maybe the cold was messing with the batteries, until the analog one on the mantel started ticking faster whenever I walked by. By mid-February, sleep stopped helping. I'd wake in the middle of night, unsure if I'd been asleep for 10 minutes or 10 hours. Sometimes I'd catch myself writing duplicate log entries, the same temperature and wind reading in different handwriting. One morning, I found yesterday's weather report still in the printer tray, but signed with tomorrow's date. And then the light started to change. We were supposed to be gaining daylight by then, a few extra minutes each day. Instead, the gray dimmed earlier and earlier, until even the noon sky looked like twilight. My lanterns began to stutter, running low faster than they should. One night, the power went out entirely. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the generator room. The air felt thick, like being underwater. My breath fogged and just hung there, not drifting. The generator was still running, humming normally, but the dials were spinning so fast I couldn't read them. And behind the hum, faint but there, came another sound, a slow, dragging tick-tock that wasn't mechanical. It pulsed through the walls like a heartbeat out of sync with everything else. I followed it down the corridor to the storage room. The tick grew louder, more deliberate. The door creaked open to a darkness that looked too deep for a windowless room. Inside, the old station clock hung on the far wall. I didn't even know it was there. It had been covered with a tarp since before I arrived. Its hands were spinning backward, slow but steady, circling the face like they were trying to dig their way through time itself. I reached to stop it. My fingers brushed the glass, and the ticking stopped. The silence that followed felt like a held breath from the whole island. Then, from outside, the wind began to whisper something low and rhythmic, syllables I couldn't place. I looked back at the clock. The hands were gone, just an empty face, smooth and dark. Then my radio crackled to life, and a voice that sounded exactly like mine said, "Caretaker's log, February 12th. The clocks have started again." I didn't record that message. That was the first thing I told myself, out loud, just to hear a human voice in that tomb of wind and static. But the radio crackled again, repeating the words exactly. Same tone, same pacing. My voice. Then silence. I unplugged the radio, yanked its batteries, and still heard one last faint click from the speaker, like a heartbeat after death. I stood there too long, listening to the wind scrape frost against the window. It wasn't whispering anymore. It was counting. Not numbers exactly, more like time itself measuring me back. The next morning, or what passed for it, I tried to reset everything. I took down every clock in the station, 7 in total, and laid them on the kitchen table. My plan was to sync them, one by one, with the timestamp on the generator log. Simple, logical. Except when I blinked, the table was empty. All 7 clocks were back on the walls where they'd been. I stood there staring, throat tight, fingers numb despite my gloves. I walked to the nearest one, an old brass ship's clock above the sink, and I swear the second hand twitched when I looked at it, like it knew I'd noticed. That night, I dreamed of the previous caretaker. I'd never met him, but in the dream, I knew it was him. He stood at the edge of the dock, snow swirling around his parka, holding a lantern that didn't flicker. Behind him, the sea ice glowed faintly blue. He turned, mouth moving, but no sound came. Then the lantern light pulsed 3 times, and his face blurred, not vanished, blurred, like a bad photo dragging across a scanner. When the light dimmed, I was looking at myself. I woke up screaming into the dark. The generator had cut again. I grabbed my flashlight, but the beam came out slow, like the air was syrup. My breath hung still, unmoving, and I realized the wind had stopped once more. Somewhere in the station, a clock ticked once. Just one beat, then another, from a different wall, then a third. Soon they were ticking in sequence, not matching any rhythm I recognized. Fast, slow, backward, forward, like time had shattered into pieces, and each clock was keeping its own shard alive. I walked through the hallway and stopped at the weather room. On the far wall, a chart showed daily temperatures and times. Only now, the times weren't in order. February 14th, sat between the 10th and 11th. February 20th repeated 4 times. And at the bottom, in handwriting that looked rushed but unmistakably mine, a line read, "Caretaker's log, February 12th. The clocks have started again." I remember dropping the pen. The floor shook once, like something huge had shifted underneath the foundation. The radio snapped on by itself, speaker hissing. Then, clear as ice cracking. "Caretaker, report." I froze. That was the mainland call sign, but the signal strength meter showed nothing. "Who is this?" I asked. "Caretaker," the voice said again. Mine. "Time of incident?" I didn't answer. The radio hissed louder, and through the static I heard dozens of ticks blending together, a chorus of clocks. Then the voice again, sharper this time. "Record the hour." I shouted into the mic, "There is no hour." The sound cut off instantly. Silence. Then all 7 clocks in the kitchen began to chime, each one a different time, each note warped by echo. One struck midnight, another dawn, another, something in between. The sound rolled through the station like thunder in water. When it stopped, the generator lights flickered once, twice, and steadied. I looked at the digital panel, devours. Every clock on the wall now read the same, exactly midnight. Relief almost made me laugh, until I noticed the second hand wasn't moving. None of them were. They were frozen in perfect stillness. And outside, the wind was gone again. The whole island had gone silent. No generator hum, no waves, not even my heartbeat in my ears. Then, from the far room, I heard slow footsteps, barefoot, deliberate, crossing the tile. When I turned toward the sound, I saw my own reflection in the window walking past behind me, even though I hadn't moved at all. For a long moment, I thought it was a trick of the glass, just my reflection warped by the frost. But the version of me in the window moved again. One step, then another, walking calmly across the reflection of the kitchen while I stood rooted in place. He stopped behind me, still facing forward in the reflection. I could see his eyes, bright as the northern horizon at dawn. Then he smiled, just a twitch of the mouth, and kept walking until he vanished off the edge of the glass. The room itself was empty. I didn't go after him. I went for the radio instead, because I needed to hear a voice that wasn't mine. The speaker was dead silent. The kind of silence that presses back when you breathe. I tapped it once, and it flared to life with a deep hum that didn't sound electrical. Then my voice came through again, slow, calm, and unbearably tired. "Caretaker's log, February 12th, confirmed second loop. External conditions unchanged. Sunrise not expected." "Who are you?" I shouted. "Stop using my voice!" The transmission crackled. I heard breathing on the other end, mine, but not synced with my own chest. Then it spoke once more, quieter. "You already asked that. You never remember asking." Something in me broke right there. The clocks on the walls began ticking again, all out of rhythm. Some ran backward, some spun freely. The old brass ship's clock above the sink turned so fast its hands blurred into a dull ring. I stumbled to the generator room. The dials were steady again, too steady, their needles welded at 0. The hum of the engine had flattened into a low, continuous tone, like a single note held too long. The air grew heavy. My flashlight dimmed, though the batteries were new. In the dull light, I saw the frost on the walls melting upward, drifting toward the ceiling like gravity had flipped. Something whispered near my ear. "Write the time." I turned. Nothing there. But my hand moved on its own, reaching for the clipboard by the door. The pen scraped against paper, writing neat lines I didn't decide. "Caretaker's log, February 12th. The clocks have started again." When I dropped the pen, the lights flickered. Then the sound of ticking vanished completely. The only thing left was the wind, or what sounded like wind, circling the station in long, even breaths. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke on the floor hours later with sunlight spilling through the windows. Real light, yellow, warm. The clocks all showed 9:42 a.m. perfectly in sync. For a few dizzy seconds, I thought it was over. Then I noticed the calendar. The last date I'd marked, February 12th, was still circled, except every square after it was blank. The days had been erased, paper smooth as if they'd never existed. When I stepped outside, the snow was undisturbed. No footprints, no wind lines, no waves, just white stretching in every direction. And at the end of the dock, someone was standing there. Me, or something close. Same coat, same stance, staring out over the frozen sea. He turned his head slightly when I called, but didn't answer. I ran toward him. Every step I took felt slower, like pushing through syrup. He stayed the same distance away, no matter how far I moved. The light around us dimmed again, sun sliding down the horizon too fast. By the time I reached the dock's end, he was gone. Only a faint smell of diesel and salt remained. I went back inside, shaking. The generator light blinked steady red. I leaned over the logbook to write what happened, and froze. The page was already filled out, my handwriting again. Caretaker's log, February 12th. The clocks have started again. Conditions identical. Repeating observation. I am still here. I flipped ahead. Every page after that said the same thing. The radio clicked. Static. Then my voice, calm and precise. Caretaker's log, February 12th. The clocks have started again. I looked up. Every clock in the room had stopped at 12 thou. Then one ticked backward. And outside, dawn began to rise in the wrong direction. I used to lead glacier hikes out of a little outfit near Juneau. We'd take tourists out by boat, drop them at the ice, strap crampons to their rental boots, and walk them through crevasses like blue cathedrals. You could hear meltwater trickling under your feet, smell the cold in your teeth. Most days, it felt like leading strangers across another planet. The company had 6 guides, all locals or long-timers. We each had our assigned colors, jackets, helmets, packs, so guests could tell who they were with. Mine was red, easy to spot against the ice. It started one afternoon late in the season when daylight hung low and mean. I'd just finished a half-day tour with a couple from Oregon and a family of 4 from Japan. Everything was normal, some slips, a few nervous laughs, lots of photos of the ice tunnels glowing electric blue. Back at the dock, one of the guests, the husband, shook my hand and said, "Thanks again for the extra route. That hidden arch you showed us was incredible." I smiled like I knew what he meant, but we hadn't taken any detours. We'd followed the marked path all day. "What arch?" I asked. "The one near the cave mouth. You said it only forms when the glacier's feeling generous." His wife nodded enthusiastically. "We saw the other guide lead another group there too, looked just like you." I thought they were mistaken. Maybe they'd glimpsed Mark or Julia, our blue and orange jackets, respectively, but the husband frowned when I said that. No. Red jacket, same company patch, even called himself by your name." That night, I checked the log. I was the only guide scheduled on Mendenhall that day. The others were running dog sled demos near the airport. I laughed it off with the others over beers. Someone said maybe I'd cloned myself to earn double tips. Someone else joked about the glacier making its own guides. I pretended to think it was funny. A few days later, another guest came into the shop to return borrowed gloves. "Tell your twin thanks," she said. "He found my phone." "I didn't find a phone," I told her. She frowned. "You did. Yesterday afternoon near the lower crevasse bridge. You even texted me from your work phone to say you'd meet me at the dock." I checked my phone. No texts, but she showed me hers. The message came from my number, word for word the way I'd probably have written it, short, polite, signed with my name. The timestamp matched the hour I'd been leading a group on the upper route. I'd had no signal there. When I told my boss, he looked uneasy. "You sure you didn't give your radio or phone to another guide?" "There was no other guide," I said. He opened the duty roster anyway. 2 entries for my name that day. Same start time, same location, same signature on both sheets. I checked the cameras we used to monitor arrivals. There I was, clear as daylight, me in my red jacket, greeting a group of 5 at the dock. Except the date was off by 1 day. The footage was labeled as taken tomorrow. We figured it was some glitch, maybe a mislabeled clip. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what that guest said, the hidden arch. There weren't any arches that time of year. The glacier doesn't grow new ones overnight. The next morning, I hiked out before the first tour, following the route he'd described. It was foggy, the kind of gray where every step feels like a decision you can't undo. The ice groaned beneath me, normal, rhythmic, alive in its slow, grinding way. And then I saw it. A perfect blue arch spanning a crevasse that wasn't on any of our maps. It shone like stained glass, hollowing the light into color. And under that arch, halfway across, a man in a red jacket stood facing away from me, leading a line of tourists deeper into the fog. He moved just like me. Same build, same stride. He even carried his ice axe crooked in his left hand, the way I always did after breaking my wrist 2 winters ago. I called out. My voice bounced around the ice, came back thin and swallowed. The other me didn't turn. Then one of his tourists, an old woman in a white beanie, looked over her shoulder at me. And the expression on her face wasn't relief. It was confusion, like she couldn't tell which of us was supposed to be real. The other guide lifted a hand and pointed at me, and all 5 of them started walking toward him. When I blinked, the arch was gone, and I was standing alone on bare ice, my boot prints the only ones in sight. By the time I made it back to the dock, I'd convinced myself I was overtired, maybe lightheaded from the cold. The others noticed something was off. I must have looked pale because Julia asked if I'd eaten. I told her I'd just seen a weird refraction on the ice, a mirage. It wasn't a total lie. What I saw had felt like light playing tricks, just tricks that knew my posture. That night, I watched the footage from the base camera again. It had looped properly this time, no future date, but there was still something wrong. At 14:17, just after my group left for the glacier, another me passed behind the boat shed, carrying an axe and a red pack. His face never caught the lens, just the side of his hood. But his gait, the limp in the left knee from the time I slipped on Moraine Ridge, was exact. I froze the frame and stared at that posture until my coffee went cold. The timestamp lined up with when I'd been halfway up the ice with my group. The next day I went out early again, alone. Mendenhall was clouded in mist, the ice surface soft from a warm spell. I marked my path with bright orange tape like always. When I reached the area where the arch had been, there was nothing but broken crust and a faint hollow smell, like old salt. Except, at the edge of one crevasse, the ice wasn't clear. It was reflective, dull, like polished glass. And inside that reflection, for a split second, I saw motion. Not a trick of light, movement, slow and deliberate, as if someone was pacing in a deeper layer of the glacier. Then I heard it. Voices. They weren't coming through the air. They came up from below, muffled by ice. A group talking, laughing lightly, the kind of fake cheer tourists use to hide nerves, and one voice that cut right through the others. My own. Watch your step here. The ice likes to change its mind. That's my line. I say it on every tour. I leaned over the crevasse until my harness line went taut. The sound grew clearer, echoing upward. Then the laughter stopped all at once, and the silence that followed felt aware. Don't follow the red, my voice said. Not a voice. My voice, warped by depth and distance. Then a crack, sharp enough to rattle my teeth, and the ice under me split a little wider. I scrambled back. The echo of my own words still hung around me, flat and wrong in the air. Back at camp, I tried to tell my boss, but he just stared. You think someone's imitating you? He asked, skeptical. I think something is, I said. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Around 3 a.m., I walked down to the dock to clear my head. The tide was low. Chunks of old ice bobbed near the pilings, faintly glowing in the starlight. Then I saw it again, the red jacket, standing out on the frozen edge where the inlet met the glacier runoff. The figure was turned toward me, just standing there, barely swaying with the wind. The light on the water rippled over its boots. I cupped my hands and shouted, "Hey!" The echo hit the ice, folded back. The figure lifted its hand, same slow wave I use when I spot another group, and then it walked backward into the fog. Not turned, not stepped away. Walked backward, keeping its face toward me until it disappeared. I waited there for half an hour, but it didn't come back. When I finally turned to leave, I nearly slipped on something shiny, half frozen in the snow. It was a guide badge. Mine. Same number, same scratches, but I was wearing mine on my jacket already. When I touched it, the metal was warm. I threw it into the water and watched it sink, but even after it vanished, the smell of cold salt and diesel clung to my gloves like I'd touched something alive. The next morning, guests came in asking about the night tour. They said the Red Jacket guide had offered them an after-hours walk under the glacier to see the hidden light. They'd turned it down, but watched him lead a few people onto the ice anyway. I checked the roster, no night tours scheduled. When I looked at the guest waiver sheets, 3 new names had been added. In handwriting, that was definitely mine. I stared at those names until my boss took the clipboard out of my hands. "You don't remember signing these?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. I didn't answer. The signatures were mine down to the pressure of the pen stroke. Same looping R, same smudge on the G from my glove. He muttered something about prank calls and paperwork errors, but the next day the rangers called from the dock. 3 visitors hadn't returned to their ship. They'd last been seen walking toward the glacier trail at dusk, following a guide in a red jacket. I didn't go out that day, nobody did. They sent a search team instead. By evening, the crew radioed back. No footprints past the midpoint markers. The fresh snow had filled everything in except a narrow trough like a drag mark that ended at a crevasse shaped in a wide half circle, like something had opened and then shut. I should have felt horror. I just felt hollow. Because I knew before they said it that the mark of the crevasse matched the curve of that arch I'd seen. 2 days later, one of the rangers, an old Tlingit guy named Leon, knocked on my cabin door. He held something wrapped in a towel. "Found this by the ice cave," he said. Inside the towel was another guide badge, red jacket issue. My number again, except the photo wasn't me. It was close, same jawline, same eyes, but the expression was wrong. My face never looked that calm. Leon tapped the picture. "Whatever this is, it's older than you think. Laminates brittle, logos from before the rebrand in '08. Maybe the glacier's spitting up its own history." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Or maybe it remembers things. That night, I dreamed I was back on the ice, leading tourists through that glowing arch. Their footsteps echoed perfectly, in rhythm, like a recording. At the end of the arch stood another me, waiting. When I tried to stop walking, my body kept going on its own. I woke with my boots still on, and they were wet. By morning, fog rolled in from the inlet so thick we could barely see the boats. The base canceled all tours. I should have stayed inside, but something pulled me. I took my crampons, radio, and went out alone. Again. Every sound on the glacier felt closer than it should have been. My own breathing bounced back off the ice walls like there were 2 of me doing it. When I reached the upper plateau, visibility dropped to 0. I could see only colorless gray and the faint shimmer of melt lines underfoot. Then, movement ahead. A group. 6 figures, tourists. They were walking single file behind someone in a red jacket. "Me," I shouted, and the sound hit me in the back of my own skull, like I was yelling into my own mouth. The other me stopped and turned. His goggles flashed pale light, Aurora green. The tourists didn't turn. They just kept walking, one by one, right into the crevasse beside him, their shapes sinking into the mist like the ice was swallowing them. He lifted a hand, palm out, like a mirror image of me. I stepped forward before I could think. The ice under me sagged, not cracked, sagged like fabric. Beneath the surface, something moved with the slow rhythm of breathing. I forced myself back, tearing the harness line on a spike of ice. The fog thinned for a second, and the arch appeared again, blue light spilling through its ribs, and I saw my double standing alone beneath it. He opened his mouth. No sound came out. Then his skin peeled backward in one smooth ripple, and what was underneath wasn't another person. It was clear, like the glacier itself had decided to try being human. My own face floated just beneath that layer, distorted by depth. The arch collapsed. The sound hit like thunder. I fell, hit my head, and by the time I crawled up again, the fog was gone. The ice was bare. No footprints, no arch, no one. The rescue crew found me 3 hours later, hypothermic and rambling. They said there were no missing persons after all. The ship had accounted for everyone. My radio logs, my waiver sheets, even my badge all checked out. But when I went to grab my spare jacket from the locker that night, there were 2 red ones hanging there, both tagged with my name, both damp with meltwater that smelled faintly of salt. I quit a week later, moved inland, haven't set foot on ice since. Still, sometimes when I scroll through old photos from that season, a duplicate shows up. Same shot, same time stamp, but in the copy, there's always an extra guide in the background. Red jacket, hood up, facing the camera, and lately, the reflection in my laptop screen looks like it's smiling before I do. I'd wanted to climb glaciers since I was a kid. Blue ice, clean air, silence so deep it pressed against your ribs. It's funny how long you can chase a dream without thinking what's underneath it. Last March, I joined a guided trek out of a small Alaskan town that barely exists on maps. 6 of us, 2 guides, 3 tourists, and me. The idiot who'd romanticized the idea of untouched wilderness. The lead guide, a local woman named Lorna, was calm and dry-humored, the kind who'd been doing this long enough to stop pretending nature cared about us. We flew out by chopper, landed on a long shelf of ice the color of polished glass, and set camp near a run of crevasses that cut the glacier like black scars. The wind up there never really stopped. It just changed its mind every few seconds. The first day was everything I wanted. Cold, clean air. Endless blue. We roped up, crossed narrow snow bridges, peered into crevasses that seemed to go down forever. At night, the ice popped and groaned like it was talking in its sleep. On the second day, just before dusk, I saw something strange in one of the fissures. We were heading back toward camp when sunlight hit a seam in the ice, turning it bright gold for a second. Deep inside that glow, maybe 30 feet down, was a square of perfect black. Not shadow. Shadow bends. This was a shape. I leaned over the lip, clipped into the rope. "You see that?" I called. Lorna looked once and frowned. "Just basalt. Ignore it." But her tone wasn't dismissive. It was worried. That night, the wind shifted to a low hum. None of us slept much. Every gust came with a sound like faint knocking, echoing through the ice from somewhere below. At dawn, I went back alone. My excuse was photography, but I just couldn't let it go. The sun was low enough that the whole glacier glowed from within, a pale blue lantern. I rappelled into the crevasse, careful, steady, my rope whispering against the wall. The deeper I went, the quieter it got, like the ice was muffling the world above. When I reached the ledge where I'd seen the black patch, I realized it wasn't rock at all. It was a door. Perfectly square, maybe 5 feet tall, carved into the ice itself. No seams, no hinges, just an impossibly dark outline that seemed to absorb the light around it. My headlamp dimmed when I aimed it there, the beam swallowed whole. I don't know why I reached out. Curiosity, stupidity, same thing, really. My glove brushed the surface, and it wasn't cold. It felt like stone left in the sun. A sound rolled through the ice, deep, slow, like a breath drawn after years of silence. My rope twitched once, like something above had grabbed it. Then, just for a moment, the door opened, not all the way. Just a crack. A thin line of yellow light bled out, dust motes turning in the air like snow in reverse. The warmth hit my face. It smelled like earth, wet moss, wood smoke, life. And behind that smell, faint but clear, came another scent. Something metallic and old. Blood. I shouted for Lorna, but my voice hit the ice and went nowhere. The yellow light flickered once, and I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching from the other side. When I yanked my hand back, the door sealed itself with a sound like a sigh. The rope jerked again, and I looked up, half expecting to see my team hauling me up. But the silhouette leaning over the lip wasn't any of them. It was me, just me, staring down, unmoving. Then the rope went slack. I fell maybe 6 feet before the ice caught me. My knees hit hard, pain cutting through the panic. When I looked up again, the lip was empty. I should have climbed out right then. Instead, I pointed my headlamp back at the wall. The black outline was gone. Just smooth blue ice, like nothing had ever been there. Except the warmth remained, faint and wrong. When I finally made it back to camp, Lorna was waiting. She didn't yell, didn't even look surprised. She just said, "You shouldn't have touched it." I laughed, because what else do you do when someone says something that strange? Touched what? She looked at the horizon where the ice met the sky. The old doors don't open for everyone, but once they do, they don't stay closed. That night, I woke to a sound under my tent. Slow scraping, like something was carving a new door in the ice, right beneath where I slept. I woke to the sound again. Steady, patient scraping beneath me, like metal against glass. The kind of sound that makes your spine stiffen before you're even conscious of it. For a few seconds, I couldn't move, just lay there in the dark, listening. Then came a thud, soft but close, and the whole tent floor trembled once, as if something large had brushed up against it from below. I unzipped the flap and looked out. The glacier was a pale desert under the half-moon, our camp lit by one flickering lantern. Every tent zipped tight. The wind had died completely. That silence felt wrong. You don't realize how alive a glacier usually sounds until it stops breathing. I crouched low and pressed my glove to the ice beside the tent. It was warm, not melting. Warm, not surface sun warmth. Living warmth. A pulse that seemed to throb faintly against my hand. Something moved in the ice under my palm. Just a shadow at first, then a ripple, like a heartbeat pushing outward through a frozen vein. I jerked my hand back. The warmth followed it, fading only when I stood. I woke Lorna. She was already sitting up, eyes open, boots on. "You felt it too," she said. I nodded. She exhaled, slow. "We pack at first light. No pictures, no samples. We leave it alone." "Leave what alone?" "The door," she said, and for the first time I noticed how tired her voice sounded, like she'd said those words before. We didn't sleep. Around 4 a.m., one of the tourists, a guy named Dennis, stumbled out of his tent in his socks, camera in hand. "You hear that?" he whispered. "Music." At first I thought he meant the wind, but there was something, faint, low, rhythmic. It sounded like a song drifting through ice from miles away, a tune made of heartbeat and distance. Dennis walked toward the edge of the crevasse. "It's coming from down there." Lorna shouted for him to stop. He didn't. The snow under his feet split like dry paper. He slipped and vanished before any of us could move. The rope line he'd clipped to for safety stretched taut, then went slack. We scrambled to the edge, shouting his name. The headlamps cut down into black, catching on blue walls slick with meltwater. Then we saw light. Yellow, faint, coming from far below, the same color I'd seen behind the door. It pulsed once, twice, and with each pulse came the sound of footsteps, but not climbing. Crossing. We pulled the rope back up. It came easily, too easily. The carabiner still locked, but the harness was cut clean. The edge of the rope was fused like it had been burned. Lorna stared at it, jaw tight. "Get your things," she said. "Now." We broke camp in 10 minutes flat, no one speaking. The ice was groaning again, faint but constant. As I shoved my gear into the pack, I saw something carved into the snow where Dennis's tent had been, small, square indentations arranged in a perfect line. They looked like door frames. Lorna led us out across the ridge. Every few minutes the wind shifted, carrying faint whispers that made it hard to tell if we were hearing language or just the ice moving in new ways. When we finally stopped to rest, I noticed the sunlight bending oddly ahead of us, a faint shimmer like heat distortion. I raised my goggles. The distortion was rectangular. Lorna saw it too. "Don't look directly at it," she said. "It notices." Before I could ask what she meant, one of the others gasped. The distortion had grown sharper, an actual outline, hovering in the air 30 feet ahead. The snow within it shimmered like water. Then the light bent, and the rectangle opened. Behind it was darkness that didn't make sense. No depth, no surface, just a flat wall of black that hurt to look at. The air rushed toward it, pulling frost and snow upward in tiny streams. Lorna screamed something I couldn't make out, grabbed my harness, and yanked me backward. The doorway folded in on itself. 2 planes of light meeting with a soft click. The sound echoed through the glacier like a heartbeat. We kept moving until sunset, our shadows long and uncertain on the snow. When we finally stopped to pitch camp again, I noticed something carved into the heel of my boot. Tiny square grooves, like the edge of a miniature doorframe. I scraped at them, but they weren't drawn. They were etched, melted into the rubber. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard a soft tapping under my mat. 1, 2, pause. Then 3 more, steady, deliberate, like a polite knock. When I lifted the mat, the ice beneath me was smooth and black, and in its reflection, I could see a faint yellow light glowing from behind my eyes. I didn't tell anyone about the light, not right away. By morning, the knock was gone, and the ice looked normal, just a dull sheet of blue-gray. But I could still feel it, a faint heat pulsing behind my eyelids whenever I blinked. We started back toward the extraction point at dawn. Nobody talked much. The glacier was louder than before, groaning, cracking deep below like something waking up. The air smelled faintly of wet stone, even though the temperature hadn't risen. By noon, we found another crevasse. It wasn't supposed to be there. Lorna's GPS insisted we were walking on solid ice, but the ground ahead had split clean down the middle, black and perfect, like the glacier had been cut with a blade. And from that blackness came warmth. The same unnatural, steady warmth that made the snow steam in faint curls. Lorna stopped us. "We go around," she said. "No one looks in." But one of the tourists, a woman named Kay, ignored her. She leaned over the edge, camera in hand. "Oh my God," she said. "It's glowing down there." The air shimmered. I smelled that same damp, earthy scent I'd caught before. Moss, wood smoke, and iron. Kay gasped. "There's a door." Before anyone could grab her, she was gone. No fall, no scream. Just gone. One moment standing at the edge, the next a flicker of yellow light and a faint sound, like a sigh being exhaled from miles below. Lorna swore under her breath, pulled the rope from her pack. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Nobody else moves. It's open again." I didn't argue. The glow rising from the crevasse had shifted. Less yellow now, more gold, pulsing like a heartbeat. The warmth reached us even from 30 feet away. My goggles fogged. Lorna looped the rope around her harness and looked at me. If I don't come back in 5 minutes, you lead them out. She didn't wait for my answer. She descended slowly, the rope whispering through the anchor. Her headlamp beam bobbed, then paused as she reached the lip of the glow. I couldn't see her face, just her silhouette against the light. "Kay?" she called softly. "If you can hear me, answer." The wind stopped. The glacier went silent. Then the light flared, bright enough to throw long shadows behind us. We heard Lorna shout, one sharp, startled cry, and then her voice changed. It became 2 voices at once, hers and another, deeper one, overlapping like echoes that didn't agree. "Don't look down," it said in her tone. "It's seeing through you." The rope jerked. We hauled it up, but when it came over the lip, the end was fused and blackened, melted smooth. We ran. I don't remember grabbing my pack or even choosing a direction. Just the white blur of snow and the low rhythmic sound of something heavy moving beneath the ice, keeping pace with us from below. By the time we reached the old campsite, the sun was gone again. The horizon pulsed faint gold, like there were doors opening and closing miles away under the surface. We huddled in silence until the dark swallowed everything. The glacier creaked once, then went still. I thought maybe we'd lost it. Maybe it had gone back to sleep. Then the snow under my boots shifted. I looked down. A perfect black square was forming around my feet, melting outward in sharp, clean lines. Inside that square, I saw light, faint yellow, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The other tourists screamed. I couldn't move. The warmth wrapped around my legs like water, and a whisper slid into my ear. Not Lorna's voice, not Kay's, not mine. "You've already opened it." The ice gave way. For half a second I was weightless. Then the world inverted, cold above, heat below, and I was falling through color and sound. When I hit the bottom, it wasn't ice that caught me. It was ground. Soft, mossy, warm. The air smelled of earth and fire. All around me stretched an endless tundra of green lit by a sky of glowing gold. And on the far horizon, scattered like forgotten doorframes, stood hundreds of black squares, each one opening and closing in slow rhythm, breathing light into the air. Someone stood beside me. I knew her shape even before I looked. Lorna. But her eyes glowed faint amber, and when she spoke, her voice was layered, hers and something older beneath it. "It only opens one way," she said, "and it remembers who knocked." When I woke, I was lying in a hospital in Anchorage. They said they'd found me wandering along a snowfield, frostbitten and delirious. No one else from the group was recovered. They tell me I was lucky, that I survived a fall no one could explain. But sometimes, at night, when I close my eyes, I feel warmth under my eyelids. And in the hum of the fluorescent lights above my bed, I hear soft knocking. 3 times, pause, then one more, like something politely waiting to be let through. That's all for this episode, but the nightmares don't end here. Subscribe for daily horror stories, leave a like if you want more, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.